Thank you so much for being here and for your willingness and your courage to talk to me and to share with me some of your experiences. Maybe you want to start out by just telling me a little bit about yourself and your experience and how your journey began.
So I'm 47 years old. I've been married for 27 years. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful husband who supports me and has supported me from the very beginning. 4 children and 3 grandchildren. They're all absolutely incredible. I made a decision from day one. The truth is it went back to when I was 8 years old, but starting from my marriage and having children, I made a decision that I was going to do everything the opposite of how I was raised, and that was my reassurance that I wouldn't repeat stuff. Even though I was so clueless, I never had mental health professionals in my life, even though I should have. I didn't know anything. I never had any education about parenting, about marriage, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to do what they did. I was going to do the opposite, and that saved me. It saved my children. I have an incredible family because of that.
You were raised in?
I was raised in an ultra-Orthodox family and community that used religion to abuse me, beat me, manipulate me, that really was in service of their own dysfunctional perception. So anyway, I came from a reign of terror. My husband somehow...
How'd you meet him?
It was a setup. It's really a miracle, because somebody who comes from the educated background that he came from, to a family and a home where secular education is completely treif or unkosher, and somehow he walks into my dining room and takes a look at me, and somehow the first minute, it was a done deal. Or I should say within the first half hour.
Kind of love at first sight?
Totally. Chemistry was amazing. He loved that I was challenging him intellectually. He was already working on his master's degree, and then he got another master's degree. In the meantime, I never even could say the word college in my house because it was an unkosher word. And we still like each other, and we love each other a lot.
You went to grade school, high school?
I went to the same school from kindergarten through 12th grade. My school was Hasidic when my family was not. But the Hasidic school that they chose for me, not religious enough for them. And at the same time, they would be beating their children for some thought that they thought the kid was having. They refused to have a couch or a recliner in the house, because if you sit down and you relax, you're wasting time and you're not studying Torah and you're not involved in spiritual pursuits. I was the scapegoat for the most part, except for my brother. We're 16 months apart, and he was an even bigger scapegoat than me. So over the years, they switched back and forth. They kicked him out of the house when he was 14. He had to find an apartment and find a job. He was just out on the street. I don't know if a day went by in the first 20 years of my life until I left that my heart wasn't racing at least sometime during the day out of absolute terror. What was going to happen next? What are they going to find out? What are they going to do next? It was just a petrifying experience all the time. I never knew when is the next time I was going to get beaten. It was a very scary, dark place. Speaking of dark, they had 25-watt bulbs in the house. My room was dark. It was hard to study. I couldn't study because I was always scared, so my eyes would glaze over when I was in school. Couldn't focus on notes, or I couldn't focus on what the teachers were saying. I was daydreaming day and night. I failed and failed and failed. There were red F's all over my report cards, year after year after year. And my father would call me stupid, nincompoop, jackass. He would call me all kinds of names. He just made me feel stupid. I lied a lot because I was petrified of them. My mother went to a parent-teacher conference in 5th grade, and she came home, and she said to me, I asked the teacher, she said, you finished the parasha and you made a siyum. And of course my heart races, I'm going to get beaten. And I did, because I had lied to her for a good several weeks when she would ask me, do you have homework to review? And each time I would make up another story. And so when she went to the parent-teacher conference, she found out that all this material was covered and I never said a word. She pushed me under the kitchen table and she beat me to a pulp. The biggest trauma of this event is that she was beating me on my arm, and I could still recall.
You feel it?
Yeah, I could recall it anytime I want. After all the trauma work I did in my own therapy, I don't feel anymore the actual pain in my arm, but I can have some kind of sensation. There's a body memory. So she shoved me under the kitchen floor and she beat me on my arm, and she kept going. And there comes a point where the body cannot tolerate it. There's a threshold for pain. Every human being has a threshold for pain, and she way surpassed it. So I tried desperately to move my body in such a way that she would hit another part of my body, because I just couldn't tolerate it anymore. And she refused to touch another part of my body. She kept beating me on the same left arm. She would not stop. So the next morning, I went to school. I showed my best friend at the time. I pulled up my sleeve. I showed her my arm, and it was purple marks all over my arm. It was really, really a scary sight. And I was desperately hoping that she would go home, tell her mother, and her mother would call the school, and then they would take me away. I used to fantasize for years that I would be taken away into foster care. Another occasion was maybe 14 or 15, and I was sleeping, and I woke up to my mother beating me. And I jumped up in my bed, and I see both my parents standing there. And I don't remember what I did wrong.
Well, you know what? Most probably you didn't do anything wrong, but for them, everything was bad and wrong. She was the one that usually would beat?
She usually beat me. He beat me too, but he had some pockets of sanity. She had none. One time, my parents were both in the room, and I was eating something that I just couldn't tolerate, and I threw up into the bowl, and they made me eat my vomit. I remember my father screaming at me to eat it. There's nothing to say. There's nothing to say about how horrific that is.
How old were you when that happened?
10. So when I was older, they had a problem with different things that I wanted to wear. I was trying to be like my friends. Again, reminding you that I lived in a Hasidic community and went to a Hasidic school. But what they were wearing wasn't modest enough. So they wanted me to just wear like these big, baggy, dark clothes. And one time when I was already a teenager, I put on some tights that had a design on it. And my father saw it. He said I was a prostitute.
Did your mother work?
No.
She was a homemaker at home with the kids?
Yes.
Your father worked?
My father was a Rebbe, but at home he had no clue how to treat his children, and he also could not protect his children from my mother. So he was very abusive, mostly verbally, extremely narcissistic, and borderline personality disorder, and of course untreated.
And your mother, what would you say her profile is?
Narcissistic, schizoid, personality disorder. She had no friends. She was very weird socially, and she couched everything under modesty, religion, but she's a monster. She was relentless in her abuse. She didn't care about how badly she was hurting her children. She had no empathy.
And she had no remorse?
No remorse, never an apology. My father, a couple of times on Erev Yom Kippur, he came to me and he said, I think it happened 2 or 3 times, "Can you forgive me?" I didn't know what to say, so I said yes. But he didn't own up to any of the specific things he did to me. He just said, "Do you forgive me?" And I was taught in school, you gotta forgive people, so that's what I did.
Whether it was physical abuse or whether it was mind games or guilt, it totally overwhelms the person's mind, body, spirit. You can't function, right? You can't do well in school. You can't fathom that a mother and a father, a quote-unquote religious mother and father, could care for these children.
When my husband and I were first married, I don't know how he had guts that I never had. He once asked my mother, "Why did you beat her?" And she said, "Because it worked." There's nothing to say to that.
Right.
She wouldn't let me go out with my friends on Shabbos afternoon because that's wasting time. What I needed to do was sit at the dining room table with these old wooden hard chairs and read Holocaust books. In school, every year, I would find a teacher that I use that teacher as a mother and tell myself that this teacher loves me and all that stuff. And at recess time or lunchtime, I would talk to the teacher, and most of them did care and would talk to me. I never told them what was really happening, but on a general basis, I wasn't taken care of because I was flunking through school and nobody did anything.
Did you date a lot of other guys before you met your husband?
I dated 10 other people, and then he came along. He was number 11.
Sure.
My miracle.
Your miracle.
Yeah. When we were engaged, he had already finished college. He was valedictorian. He was working on his first master's thesis, and he said to me when we were engaged, we were out one time, and he said, "You're going to go to college." And I kind of freaked out inside because I didn't tell him that I flunked out school from kindergarten through 12th grade. He had no idea that I flunked through school. So I was really scared by what he said. And I said, no, I wasn't raised that way. He says, no, you'll see, you'll go. He goes, you may not go now. You may go in 10 years from now, but you'll go. So I said to myself, all right, I got 10 years to worry about it. I'm not going to, I don't need to freak out right now, at least. When I was pregnant, I took the SATs. I got into school. I had the guts to take one course because he really wanted me to do it. And I got an A-, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take one more course. And that's how I did it.
One
It
step
took
at
me
a
4
time.
years, but my husband encouraged me.
After you got married, obviously way before your father died, did you have any sort of connection or interaction with your parents?
So shortly after we were married, maybe about a year, my father calls me up, and it was not too far away from Pesach, and he said, "We don't want you coming because Pesach is about Masorah, and you don't follow our Masorah." Now let me explain to you what's going on here. My husband was in Kollel. I was working to support him, which is what I was raised to do, just to, that I should have like 17 children and support my husband in Kollel, but I'm not allowed to go to school and get a profession. I have to be either a secretary or a teacher. My husband was actually learning, and my father calls me up and says, "You don't follow our Masorah." Now, probably it's because my skirts were just not as long as before I got married.
Right.
When I got married, my mother-in-law saved me from this too. I think you should shorten your skirts. And I was thrilled out of my mind. I took all my skirts from my closet and I brought them to the dry cleaner. They have a tailor. I got them all cut. They were all modest, covering my knees and everything, but too short
Shorter.
for them. Yeah, shorter. So maybe that's what they meant. I don't know.
Right.
Oh, I wore eye makeup. I wasn't allowed to do that. So we were uninvited to the Seder.
But
We
did
had-
you speak to them? Let's say.
So I tried. So when I first got married, I know that my friends were calling their parents every Friday. At least on Friday, you're supposed to call your parents to wish them a good Shabbos. I tried to do the normal thing. So I called my mother every Friday when I got married for a few months. And she would just be silent on the other end. By the way, she only called me when somebody died. Parents never called me to see how I am, how the children are. After I gave birth, nobody cared. Nobody called me up, how you're feeling. There was none of that. I would try to say something nice or tell her something nice about my week or try to just do the normal thing. And it didn't work. And after a while, I just stopped because it just wasn't working and I didn't think I should be doing that anymore. Speaking of phone calls, one time, I was married probably 2 years. I called her up on Erev Yom Kippur. I asked her for forgiveness for anything that I did to upset her, or because I figured that even though she was abusive and she did all these crazy things, maybe still I'm an adult and I did things that were disturbing to her. I should ask forgiveness. This is the answer that I got. "You made your bed, now lie in it." I had no idea what to say.
By the way, did she approve of your husband? Did she
She
approve
never
of him?
said one positive word about him. On the day of my wedding, she did not say a word to me. She never said to me, "I'm so happy for you. You're getting such a good husband." Not one nice word to me, even on the day of my wedding. But then, after my father died, I started to talk about the abuse, because my father was plenty abusive. So after he died, I started to talk about stuff that he did and that she did. I received a letter, hand-delivered to my mailbox, and it was signed by, I have 7 siblings, so all of them and their spouses, so that's 14 signatures, plus my mother, 15 signatures on this letter, saying that if I talk about our precious parents, you're out of the family, and that includes family simchas, that includes this. As I made a whole list, I'm out of the family. My whole body was shaking for hours. That's really the start of my liberation, because they're toxic and they're not good for me, and I'm totally fine not having any contact with them. So
you have no contact
I have
at
no
this point?
contact with any of my siblings. And this
Your
one of-
mother?
My mother, no.
Never.
For years I couldn't even say the word mother, and now I could say it after all this therapy that I've been in.
You have liberated yourself from them,
Yes.
which I think, how healthy that is for you.
That's because I had finally found therapists who were much more competent than my previous therapists.
Just goes to show when a person is allowed to blossom and to grow and to learn, despite the fact that they had so much trauma inflicted upon them, how well you did. I think it's just incredibly inspirational.
My husband encouraged me, and I didn't know how to use a library. He would take me to the library and help me find books. He helped me every step of the way.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful about this is because you see the beauty of what support, nurturance, and love can do. Despite all the things that you were told when you were younger, and that you were able to say, you know what, I can do this. I'm not stupid. I guess maybe we want to leave our listeners with some ideas about your thoughts and your feelings about what message you want to send to victims or survivors of trauma and abuse. What would you like to say?
First of all, children who are being abused are in a catch-22 because they're most of the time being abused by people who are threatened by therapy and don't want to hear about going to learn about how they should treat their children better, and they certainly wouldn't allow their children to step into a therapist's office. So children are trapped a lot of the time, unless they have somebody else in their life who can rescue them, which I certainly did not have. The other thing I would say is that if you're a survivor of physical, mental, psychological, emotional, or sexual abuse, that you should really try to find a therapist that is trained to treat trauma, and to not just go down a list and find any therapist that will sit and talk with you, because that's not going to bring healing. If you see a child failing, don't automatically assume that they don't have the mental capacity to do well in school. Pay attention, do research, find out what's going on at home. In many instances, kids are not doing well in school for many other reasons, not because they have developmental disabilities or learning disabilities.
Right.